The cake was 5 tiers high, and it cost more than the maid earned in a year. And in about 90 seconds, it was going to be on the floor with a woman's face in it. Police would later have trouble reconstructing the exact sequence, because 40 guests all remembered it differently. The way people always remember the moment everything turns. But the part they agreed on was this. The maid, whose name most of them did not know, crossed the ballroom fast, and she said 5 words, and then she did a thing that no one who worked in that house would ever have believed a servant could do to the woman about to become its mistress. Her name was Fola, and she had been carrying what she knew for 3 days, and she had run out of quiet ways to say it. Before I take you into that ballroom and the 90 seconds that unmade an entire wedding, because what the maid knew, and how she came to know it, and what happened when the truth finally hit that marble floor is going to keep you here to the end. Stay with me. Subscribe if you're new, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. This story travels far, and I love to see how far. The engagement party was the largest the house had thrown in years. 40 guests, the heads of allied families, a room dressed in white and gold, and at the center of it the cake, a 5-tiered monument that a specialist had spent 2 days constructing, meant to crown the announcement that Ryota Shamizu would marry the woman on his arm. His name was one that a great many people said carefully. Hers was Katie, and she was beautiful, and she had spent 6 months making herself indispensable to a man who trusted almost no one, and she was, that evening, perhaps an hour from everything she had worked for. Fola had been assigned to the kitchen for the party. She was good in a kitchen, she was good at most things, in the quiet, unnoticed way of a person the household had decided did not count, and she had spent the afternoon among the caterers, invisible, doing the endless small work that made a party like this possible. Which was how she came to be in the pantry, unseen. At the exact moment she should not have been, 3 days before, when the thing began that she was now about to end. She had not been looking for it. That was what she would say later, over and over, to people who found it hard to believe. She had simply been in a place where she was so thoroughly not seen that people spoke freely in front of her as though she were furniture. And she had heard a thing that a woman like Kaede would never have said if she had remembered Fola was in the room. And once she had heard it, she had spent 3 days trying to find a way to say it that would be believed, and had found none. Because who believes a maid over the woman a mafia boss has chosen to marry? What she had heard, that day in the pantry, was Kaede on the phone, low, careful, the voice people use for the calls they cannot be caught making. And what Kaede had said, in that voice, was enough to freeze the blood of anyone who understood what it meant. She was not who she claimed to be. The family she had presented as her own, the connections that had made her a suitable match, the whole clean history she had walked into the house wearing. It was construction, a false front built to get her close to Ryota, and behind it was another loyalty entirely. She was working for people who wanted Ryota gone, and the marriage was the door she was walking through to reach him. And the engagement party, Fola had heard this part with her whole body going cold, was where it was going to begin. The cake. Fola had not understood, at first, that the cake was the instrument. She had understood only that something was planned for the party, and that Kaede was the one planning it, and that she had 3 days and no one who would believe her. She had tried. That was the part that mattered, the part that would justify everything that came after. She had tried the quiet ways first. She had gone to the head of the household staff, an older man named Sato, who had run the house for decades, and she had told him what she heard, and she had watched his face close over with the particular fear of a man who has survived a long time by never carrying dangerous information upward. He had told her she must have misunderstood. He had told her, more sharply, that repeating such a thing about the master's bride was a way to end up dismissed. Or worse. He had told her to forget it. She had not been able to forget it. So she had tried to reach Ryota himself, and had learned how thoroughly a woman like Katie had already sealed the ways in. Fola could not get near him. The household had been reorganized in the months of the engagement, quietly, in the way such things are done, so that access to the master ran through channels Katie had influence over, and a kitchen maid with a wild story about the bride found every one of those channels closed. She had written a note, and it had not reached him. She had tried to speak to one of his men and been turned away. And then, it was the night of the party, and she was in the kitchen, and she watched the cake come in. And she watched Katie, who had no reason to be in the kitchen, who had never once set foot in it in 6 months, find a reason to be near it, alone, for the length of time it takes to do a small and terrible thing to one tier of a 5-tier cake. And Fola understood that she had run out of quiet ways. Funny thing about being invisible. People forget you can see. She could have run to Sato again. He would have told her again to forget it. She could have tried, one more time, to reach a man she had already failed 3 times to reach, and the cake would have been cut and served in the time it took her to fail a 4th. She stood in the kitchen with the knowledge burning in her, and she did the mathematics that people who are about to do irreversible things do, and she understood that there was exactly one way left to make 40 people, and one powerful man look at the truth, and it was not a quiet way at all. She followed the cake into the ballroom. She was not supposed to be there. Kitchen staff did not enter the ballroom during the party. That was for the serving staff, in their different uniforms. But no one stops a woman moving with purpose. Not in the half-second it takes her to cross a room, and Fola had spent 3 days building the purpose that carried her across that marble floor, while Ryota stood at the head of it, with Kaede on his arm, both of them turning at the disturbance, Kaede's face beginning to change as she registered which maid it was, and understood. Too late. What 3 days of that maid's silence might have been building toward. She poisoned the cake, Fola said. Loud enough for the whole room. 5 words, thrown into the beautiful white and gold silence like a stone through glass. For 1 second, nothing. 40 faces turning. The absurdity of it. A kitchen maid shouting an accusation at an engagement party, the kind of thing that gets a servant dragged out and destroyed. Fola could see the room deciding, in that second, that she was mad, that this was a scene, that she would be removed and it would be talked about for weeks, as the night the help lost her mind. Kaede recovered first. Of course she did. She was good. She had always been good. Get her out of here, Kaede said to no one and everyone, her voice pitched to the perfect note of alarmed authority. She's been unstable for weeks. I've heard the staff talk about it. Please, someone. And there it was. The reversal. The thing that had beaten Fola 3 times already. The ease with which a woman like Kaede could turn the truth-teller into the problem. Fola watched it working on the room in real time, watched the guests' faces shift from shock toward the comfortable conclusion that this was simply a mad servant and not a thing they needed to take seriously, and she understood that she had 1 move left and no time to think about it. She had brought proof of a kind. But the proof was in the cake, and no one was going to cut into a 5-tier wedding cake on the word of a maid being called unstable by the bride. Words would not do it. Words had failed for 3 days. The only thing left that could not be talked around, the only thing a room full of people could not unsee, was the cake itself, opened in front of everyone before the bride could stop it. So Fola did the thing they would talk about forever. She reached the cake, and she reached Kaede, who had stepped between the maid and the table with the instinct of a woman protecting the one piece of evidence that could hang her. And Fola took hold of the back of the bride's head and drove her face down into the tear, the specific tear. The one she had watched Kaede tamper with in the kitchen, smashing through the perfect white fondant, through the sponge, down into whatever was inside. The room erupted. A woman screamed. Men surged forward. Ryota's guards were moving, and in another 2 seconds Fola would have been on the floor, and it would all have been over. Except that when Kaede came up from the cake, gasping, her beautiful face ruined with frosting, something came up with her. It was small, a packet, or a vial, or the remains of one. Later accounts differed on exactly what it was, but they agreed on the shape of the moment, which was that when the bride's face was driven into the cake, the thing she had hidden inside it came up stuck to her cheek, in front of 40 witnesses and the man she was about to marry. In a place no innocent thing had any reason to be. A wedding cake does not contain a sealed packet, buried in its second tier. Everyone in that room understood, in the same instant, that whatever was stuck to Kaede's face had been put there by someone, hidden there, and that a maid had just risked her life to show them where. The guards stopped. That was the moment it turned. Ryota Shamizu held up one hand, and his guards stopped, an arm's length from Fola, and the whole room froze with them. He was looking at his bride. He was looking at the thing on her face. And Fola watched a man who trusted almost no one do the terrible arithmetic of realizing that the one person he had decided to trust completely had buried something in his engagement cake. "Don't let her wipe her face," Fola said into the silence, fast, before the moment could slip. "Whatever it is, it's on her now. She hid it in the cake. I watched her do it in the kitchen. She's not who she told you she is. I tried to tell Sato. I tried to send you a note. I tried for 3 days, and nobody would." Her voice cracked. "Nobody listens to the maid, so I did it the only way that would make you look." Ryota looked at her. Then he looked at Kaede, who had gone very still, frosting dripping from her chin. The thing still stuck to her cheek, and whose face was doing something now that no amount of 6 months' careful construction could control. The specific collapse of a person who has been caught, all at once, in front of everyone, with no version of the story left to tell. "Test it," Ryota said quietly to one of his men. "Whatever that is. I want to know what it is before anyone touches that cake again." Kaede broke then, not into confession, into flight, or the attempt at it, a lunge for the door that the guards folded around before she had taken 3 steps. And in the way she moved, in the pure animal panic of it, the last of the room's doubt died. Innocent women called mad by circumstance do not run. They stay and are vindicated. Kaede ran, and everyone saw her run, and the running was the confession her mouth would not give. The thing on her face was tested. What it was, exactly, the guests were never fully told. These things are handled privately in a world like Ryota's. But it was what Fola had said it was, or close enough. And it had been meant for the cake. And the cake had been meant for Ryota. And the engagement party had been meant to be the last party he ever attended. All of it exactly as a kitchen maid had heard through a pantry wall and spent 3 days failing to make anyone believe. The thing about the truth is that it does not care who is holding it. It will sit as heavily in the hands of a maid as in the hands of a king, and it will be just as true. And the only question is whether the world can bear to look at it in a servant's hands. Fola had known, going into that ballroom, that the world could not, that she would have to force the looking, that words would never be enough. that she would have to do something so undeniable that not even a room full of people who had decided she was furniture could pretend they had not seen it. She had smashed a bride's face into a cake because it was the only argument left that a maid could make and win. They did not arrest her. That was the first thing Fola braced for, in the chaos after, that she would be blamed anyway, that assaulting the bride would be the thing that stuck to her regardless of what the bride had done. But Ryota Shamizu was not a man who punished the person who had just saved his life, and he made that clear, immediately and publicly, in the way that mattered in that room. He had his men see to KAD, and then, with the party in ruins around him and 40 guests still trying to understand what they had witnessed, he crossed the ballroom to the maid, who was standing very still in the wreckage of a 5-tiered cake, waiting to learn her fate. "Sato," Ryota said, without looking away from Fola. "Come here." The old head of staff came. "Pale, she told you," Ryota said. "It was not a question 3 days ago. She told you what she'd heard, and you told her to forget it." Sato did not answer, which was its own answer. "You were afraid," Ryota said. "I understand fear. But she was afraid too, and she came forward anyway, 3 times, into every door you in this household closed in her face. She had more to lose than you did, and less power to survive it, and she did the brave thing while you did the safe one." He was quiet for a moment. "We'll talk later about what that means for your position." He turned back to Fola. "You tried to send me a note," he said. "Yes, it never reached me." "No, how many times did you try to be heard before you decided the only way was this?" Fola thought about it. 3 days, she said. "Every way I could think of. Sato, a note. One of your men at the door. Nobody would take a warning from the kitchen seriously enough to carry it to you. So I stopped trying to be believed, and I made it so you couldn't not believe. I'm sorry about the cake. I'm sorry about her face. I couldn't think of another way to make 40 people look at the truth at the same time." Ryota Shamizu looked at this woman, this maid, this person his entire household had decided did not count, who had carried a death warning for 3 days through every closed door in his house, and finally thrown herself across a ballroom to save a man who had never once learned her name. "What is your name?" he asked. "Fola. Fola." He said it carefully. "The way you say a thing you intend to remember. You saved my life tonight. My whole household saw the danger and stepped around it. My oldest servant heard the warning and buried it. The men I pay to protect me were guarding the wrong person. And a woman I had never noticed heard the truth through a wall and spent 3 days trying to hand it to me. And when we all refused to take it, she found a way to make us look that none of us could survive ignoring." He shook his head slowly. "I have been protected by dangerous men my whole life. I have never once been protected like that. The house changed after that night, in the way a house changes when the person at the center of it learns that he had misjudged where its value lay." Fola was not a kitchen maid the next morning. Ryota, who trusted almost no one and had just learned exactly how badly his trust had been placed, did the thing that a wiser man does after such a lesson, which was to move the one person who had proven trustworthy toward him, rather than away. Sato found his long reign at the head of the staff at its end. And Fola, who had spent her life being furniture, found herself, slowly and with much suspicion on her own part, becoming something else entirely in that house. It was not a romance, at first, and for a long time it was not clear it would become one. What it was, at first, was simpler and rarer, the recognition, by a man who had almost died of misplaced trust, of the one person who had earned it. He did not rush her toward anything. She would not have allowed it if he had. A woman who has spent her life being overlooked does not melt at the first man to finally see her, and Fola was too clear-eyed for that. But he saw her. That was the thing that had never happened to her before, in that house or any house. He saw her, and he consulted her, and he treated her judgment as the thing that had saved his life, which it was. The rest came later, in its own time, by her decision, the way the real things do. Here is what the powerful learn too late, if they learn it at all. They surround themselves with dangerous men and beautiful strangers and elaborate constructions of trust. And they spend their whole lives certain that safety is a thing you buy with power. And then one night, the danger walks in wearing the face they trusted most. And the only person who saw it coming is the one they never bothered to see at all. The woman in the kitchen. The furniture, the one who did not count. The truth does not care whose hands hold it. But the world spends enormous effort making sure it never has to look at the truth in the hands of the powerless. And sometimes the only way to make it look is to do something no one can pretend away. Fola smashed a bride's face into a cake in front of 40 people because every quiet door had been closed to her. And in doing it, she proved the oldest lesson the mighty refuse to learn, that the person you overlook may be the only one who ever tells you the truth, and that a warning is worth exactly as much, whether it comes from a throne or from the kitchen, right up until the moment it saves your life.